Have you ever imagined what it's like to discover a pharaoh's tomb? You probably picture gold, jewels, and a perfectly preserved king sleeping for eternity. That's what archaeologist Howard Carter expected in 1922 when he finally breached the tomb of Tutankhamun. But what he found was less of a sacred crypt and more of a chaotic, hastily assembled storeroom. This wasn't the pristine, eternal resting place of a god-king. It was a scene of disarray, and it was just the beginning of a shocking mystery that challenges everything we thought we knew about the famous boy king. The treasures were piled up haphazardly, as if thrown in during a frantic rush. It was clear from the start that something was very, very wrong. The deeper Carter and his team ventured, the more questions arose. They started examining the magnificent treasures, the very items that would soon captivate the world. But a disturbing pattern emerged. A huge number of these priceless artifacts weren't originally made for Tutankhamun at all. They were hand-me-downs. The grand golden shrines that enclosed the coffins, the beautiful canopic chest meant to hold his organs, and even the tiny golden coffins for his internal bits, they all bore signs of being altered. Names had been erased and replaced with Tutankhamun's. It was like someone had gone on a royal shopping spree in someone else's tomb, grabbing whatever they could find to furnish a burial on a budget, or more likely, on a deadline. The most famous artifact of all, the iconic golden death mask, held the biggest secret. It's the face of ancient Egypt, recognized all over the globe. But on closer inspection, experts found telltale signs that it too was a repurposed piece. The face, made of solid gold, appeared to be soldered onto the rest of the headdress, suggesting it was a replacement. Even more revealing were the pierced ears. In that era of Egyptian history, ear piercings were common for queens and children, but not for adult male pharaohs. The mask was almost certainly made for a woman. The prime suspect? The legendary Queen Nefertiti, who some believe was Tutankhamun's predecessor and co-regent. It seems Tutankhamun was buried wearing the face of his stepmother. Why the rush? Why the recycled goods for a king? The story only gets darker when we look at the king himself. Tutankhamun's mummy was in an absolutely terrible state. When Carter's team opened the coffin, they found the linen wrappings and the body were carbonized, stuck together in a black, brittle mass. It turned out that the embalming oils had spontaneously combusted inside the sealed coffin, essentially slow cooking the pharaoh at over 200 degrees Celsius. He was the only Egyptian pharaoh ever discovered to have suffered such a bizarre and catastrophic fate. This botched mummification was unprecedented. But the most horrifying discovery was yet to come. The ancient Egyptians believed the heart was the seat of intelligence and the key to being judged in the afterlife. It was the one organ that was always left inside the body. But Tutankhamun's heart was gone. It had been removed. So, what does this all mean? A chaotic tomb, recycled treasures, a mask made for a queen, a burned mummy, and a missing heart. The evidence points to a rushed, frantic, and deeply unconventional burial. Tutankhamun died young and unexpectedly, likely plunging the royal court into a crisis. With no proper tomb or treasures ready, it seems they had to improvise, raiding other royal burials, perhaps even Nefertiti's, to give him a send-off fit for a king, even if it was all a facade. The missing heart and the cooked body suggest either a profound level of incompetence or something more sinister. Was it a cover-up? An attempt to prevent him from reaching the afterlife? The tomb of Tutankhamun isn't a story of glorious eternal rest. It's a 3,000-year-old crime scene filled with secrets that we are still trying to unravel today. Archaeologists found quivers in the tomb, for holding arrows. But these weren't your typical Egyptian-style quivers. They were decorated with Syrian motifs. Think of it like finding a Viking longship design in a Roman general's tomb. It just doesn't fit. It's completely alien to the traditional art of the Nile Valley. Why would the boy king, a pharaoh of Egypt, be buried with gear that looked like it came from a foreign land? It's a small detail, but these small details are starting to pile up, aren't they? And it gets even weirder when you look at the tomb itself. The very architecture whispers a secret. See, in ancient Egypt, the layout of a royal tomb was incredibly specific. For a king, the main corridor would typically turn left. But in Tutankhamun's tomb, KV 62, the corridor turns to the right. Now, this might sound like a minor architectural choice, but in the rigid world of Egyptian funerary customs, it was a huge deal. A right turn was a feature reserved exclusively for the tombs of queens. The most famous example is the tomb of Hatshepsut, the powerful female pharaoh. So we have a king, a male pharaoh, buried in a tomb that screams queen. It's as if they were trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, forcing a king's burial into a space that was clearly designed for a woman of royal blood. But wait, there's more. Let's talk about the furniture. Tutankhamun is famous for one thing above all else: restoring the old religion. His father, Akhenaten, was the heretic king who threw out the entire pantheon of Egyptian gods in favor of a single sun disk, the Aten. This was the Amarna period, a revolutionary and controversial time. Tutankhamun, whose original name was Tutankhaten, changed his name and moved the capital back to Thebes, signaling a complete return to the old ways. He was the great restorer, the one who brought back Amun-Ra and the traditional gods. So you would expect his tomb to be a shining example of this religious restoration, right? A total rejection of his father's heresy. Well, you'd be wrong. The furniture found in his tomb is still dripping with the artistic style of the Amarna period. It's like he never left. The flowing lines, the naturalistic poses, the intimate family scenes, it's all classic Amarna art. Why would a king who so publicly abolished that entire era choose to be surrounded by it in death for all eternity? It makes no sense. And the most famous piece of all, his golden throne, holds the biggest clue. On the back of the throne, there's a beautiful, intimate scene of Tutankhamun and his queen, Ankhesenamun. But look closer. The art style is pure Amarna. And even more telling, look at the queen. In traditional Egyptian art, men were painted with a dark, reddish-brown skin tone to represent their time spent outdoors, while women were painted with a lighter, yellowish tone. But on this throne, the queen has the dark red skin of a man. This isn't just a stylistic choice. It's a deliberate iconographic statement. Its imagery directly lifted from the heretical art of Akhenaten's reign, where the royal family was often depicted with androgynous features. So we have a king who restored the old gods, resting on a throne carved with heretical imagery, in a tomb built for a queen with foreign-looking equipment. Every piece of evidence seems to contradict the official story. It forces us to ask a startling question. Was this tomb ever actually meant for Tutankhamun? Could it be that his sudden, unexpected death forced his officials to scramble to repurpose an existing tomb and its contents for a hasty royal burial? Perhaps a tomb intended for his wife or another royal woman was the only option available. All these clues point to a story far more complex than the one we've been told. It suggests a rushed burial, a time of political uncertainty, and a legacy that was pieced together from the remnants of others. The boy king's tomb might not be a grand monument to his reign, but a historical accident, a time capsule of chaos and compromise. Who exactly was Tutankhamun compared to his long-forgotten older brother, Prince Thutmose? He was the eldest son of Amenhotep III and Queen Tai, the heir to the powerful 18th dynasty throne. However, he vanished from the historical records, overshadowed by his brother Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh who upended Egypt. For decades, Thutmose was merely a footnote in history. But what if he never truly disappeared? When Howard Carter famously discovered Tutankhamun's tomb, KV62, in 1922, the world was dazzled by its golden treasures. But amidst the splendor, there were clues that didn't quite add up. Carter found a simple wooden chest and a whip, both inscribed with the name of Prince Thutmose. Inside that same chest was a miniature coffin containing a lock of hair, identified as belonging to his grandmother, Queen Tai. Why would artifacts belonging to the long-lost crown prince be in his much younger brother's tomb? This is where the plot thickens. The tomb itself tells a strange story. Forensic analysis of the burial chamber walls revealed something peculiar. Dark fungal spots, almost like freckles, covering the painted scenes. These spots indicate that the tomb was sealed while the plaster and paint were still wet. This suggests an incredibly rushed burial. A pharaoh's death was usually anticipated, with years spent preparing an elaborate final resting place. The state of this tomb points to a sudden, unexpected death, forcing a hasty interment without the proper time for preparation. This wasn't the grand send-off a pharaoh deserved. Furthermore, the tomb's layout is small and modest for a king. It more closely resembles the tombs of high-ranking nobles or queens, not a ruler of Egypt. In fact, many Egyptologists believe KV62 was originally intended for someone else entirely, possibly even the famous Queen Nefertiti, and was repurposed in a hurry. The jumble of treasures, some appearing to be hand-me-downs from other royals, further supports this idea of a chaotic makeshift burial. Now, let's look at the mummy itself. The body found in the golden sarcophagus was that of a young man, but initial examinations revealed it was badly charred. An early theory suggested a botched mummification process where flammable resin spontaneously combusted. This adds another layer of strangeness to the burial. Could this charred mummy not be Tutankhamun at all? This is where the alternative theory comes into focus. What if the mummy in KV62 is actually Prince Thutmose? Imagine this scenario. Thutmose, the rightful heir, dies unexpectedly as a young man. With no tomb ready for him, the royal family scrambles. They commandeer a smaller, unfinished tomb, perhaps Nefertiti's, and hastily bury him with a mix of his own possessions and other available funerary goods. This would explain the whip and chest bearing his name, the hurried sealing of the tomb, and the modest layout. So, if the body in the tomb is Thutmose, what happened to the real Tutankhamun? This theory proposes that Tutankhamun was a frail, sickly child who died very young and was given a simple, unrecorded burial. As a minor figure who reigned for a short time and left little impact, he was simply forgotten by history, his memory eclipsed by the turmoil of the Amarna period. It was only the discovery of this magnificent, repurposed tomb that thrust his name into the global spotlight, mistakenly associating him with the mummy inside. This idea challenges everything we thought we knew. It reframes the Golden Boy King as a historical footnote and elevates his long-lost brother Thutmose into the spotlight. It turns the story of Tutankhamun's tomb into the story of Thutmose's emergency burial. The evidence is compelling. The mismatched artifacts, the rushed paint job, the strangely small tomb. Could the world's most famous pharaoh be a case of mistaken identity? While DNA testing has linked the KV62 mummy to the 18th dynasty royal line, confirming he is the son of Akhenaten, the debate isn't fully settled. The complexities of ancient DNA can leave room for interpretation. The mystery remains. Was it a sickly child king who got a rushed burial, or was it his long-lost brother, unexpectedly thrust into a tomb that wasn't his? The sands of Egypt still hold their secrets close. Did you know that Tutankhamun, the world's most famous pharaoh, might not be the person buried in his magnificent tomb? This is a mind-bending theory that could rewrite a huge chunk of ancient Egyptian history. Let's dive into the evidence and explore this fascinating possibility. When Howard Carter discovered Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, it was an unparalleled archaeological find, packed with treasures. But right from the start, there were some strange inconsistencies. The tomb itself is surprisingly small for a pharaoh, and its layout looks more like a private tomb, not a royal one. Art historians also noticed that many of the treasures, including the famous golden mask, seem to have been originally made for someone else and then hastily repurposed for Tutankhamun. The name on some items was clearly changed. So, what was going on? Why the rush? Why the hand-me-down grave goods for a king? This is where the story gets really interesting. Let's talk about a forgotten prince named Thutmose. He was the eldest son of Pharaoh Amenhotep III and Queen Tai, making him the older brother of the revolutionary pharaoh Akhenaten and Tutankhamun's uncle. As the crown prince, Thutmose was destined to rule Egypt. He held important titles like High Priest of Ptah, but then he just vanished from the historical record. Most historians believe he died young, before his father, allowing his younger brother Akhenaten to ascend to the throne. His death cleared the path for one of the most chaotic periods in Egyptian history. Now, let's connect this back to Tutankhamun's tomb. Inside the treasury room, among all the golden artifacts, archaeologists found a simple wooden box. Inscribed on this box was the name of none other than Crown Prince Thutmose. Inside it was several miniature coffins, and most movingly, a braided lock of hair belonging to his grandmother, Queen Tai. Why would an object so personal to Prince Thutmose be in Tutankhamun's tomb? It's like finding a labeled suitcase belonging to one person in another person's hotel room. It just doesn't quite fit. There's more. The tomb itself tells a story of haste. Forensic analysis of the tomb's walls revealed dark fungal spots, which could only have grown if the tomb was sealed while the plaster and paint were still wet. This strongly suggests an emergency burial. Someone died unexpectedly, and the workers had to slap the tomb together as quickly as possible, not even waiting for the paint to dry. A royal burial was a meticulously planned affair, sometimes taking years to prepare. This rush job is highly unusual for a pharaoh. So, let's put the pieces of the puzzle together. We have a tomb that's too small for a king, filled with repurposed treasures. We have personal belongings of a long-lost prince, Thutmose, placed carefully inside. And we have clear evidence of a rushed emergency burial. This has led some Egyptologists to propose a radical theory. The mummy in KV62. The body we all know as Tutankhamun is not Tutankhamun at all. It is the body of his long-lost great-uncle, Prince Thutmose. According to this theory, Thutmose died unexpectedly as a young man. With no tomb ready for him, the royal family scrambled. They took a tomb that was likely being prepared for another royal, possibly Nefertiti, and hastily converted it for the crown prince. They gathered whatever treasures they could, even some that were meant for others, and buried him with the honors befitting his station. The mummified cat found in the tomb, a rare find, could also be linked to Thutmose, who, as high priest of Pata, was associated with the sacred Apis bull and, by extension, other sacred animals. So where does that leave the real Tutankhamun? In this version of events, the boy king, who was a frail child and ruled for only a short time, may have died and been buried in a much simpler undiscovered tomb that was later lost to history or robbed in antiquity. His name was then attached to the grander sealed tomb of his great-uncle to solidify his place in the royal lineage. It was a political move to legitimize the end of the chaotic Amarna period and restore the traditional line of succession. This theory explains so many of the oddities surrounding Tutankhamun's tomb: the size, the repurposed goods, the rushed job, and the mysterious presence of Prince Thutmose's belongings. It's a compelling narrative that challenges everything we thought we knew. Is the world's most famous king an imposter? Is the face on that golden mask not Tut's, but that of the forgotten prince who should have been king? The mysteries of ancient Egypt are far from solved, and that's what makes it so endlessly captivating. For years, Howard Carter toiled under the Egyptian sun, finding little more than sand and disappointment. His sponsor, Lord Carnarvon, was growing impatient. His funds and Carter's career were on the line. The pressure was immense. Imagine the desperation. You've dedicated your life to one single goal, and you're watching it slip through your fingers. What would you do to save it? To achieve the fame you've always craved? This is where our story takes a dark turn. The theory suggests that Carter didn't find one tomb. He found two. The first, a less significant tomb, perhaps belonging to a minor royal, contained the incredible treasures we now associate with King Tut. The second, a separate, plainer burial, held the mummy of a pharaoh, but not Tutankhamun. Some speculate it could have been the body of Thutmose. Faced with two incomplete discoveries, neither grand enough on its own to secure his legacy, Carter's desperation may have sparked a brilliant, deceitful idea. What if he could combine them? What if he could create the discovery of a lifetime? According to this theory, Carter and his inner circle orchestrated an elaborate deception. They secretly moved the treasures from the first tomb into the second. To make it convincing, they constructed false walls, partitioning off the space to create the famed antechamber and burial chamber. This would explain some of the oddities archaeologists have pointed out for decades. The tomb's a small size for a pharaoh, the hurried and somewhat clumsy artwork on the walls, and the fact that many of the objects inside seem to be repurposed or originally intended for someone else, including the iconic golden mask, which some studies suggest was originally made for a woman, possibly Nefertiti. The rushed paint job on the walls, still wet when the tomb was officially opened, was just one more piece of a hastily assembled puzzle. They created a narrative, a perfect story for the newspapers. The sealed doors, the untouched treasures, the boy king resting peacefully for 3,000 years. The world was captivated, and Howard Carter became a global superstar. But secrets this big are hard to keep. People talk. And this is where the legend of the Pharaoh's curse gets a sinister new meaning. Was it really an ancient curse, or a very modern method of silencing witnesses? Think about it. Lord Carnarvon, the financial backer, died just a few months after the tomb was opened, from an infected mosquito bite that turned septic, a strangely mundane end for the start of a supernatural legend. But he wasn't the only one. Over the next decade, a surprising number of people connected to the excavation died under unusual or premature circumstances. Carter's personal secretary, Richard Bethel. Bethel's father, who leaped from a 7-story window. Radiologist Archibald Reed, who X-rayed the mummy. American railroad tycoon George J. Gould, who visited the tomb. The list goes on. Was it a curse, or was it a systematic and terrifying cleanup operation designed to ensure the secret of Tutankhamun never saw the light of day? The curse provided the perfect cover. So, the magnificent King Tut we celebrate, the face of ancient Egypt, might be nothing more than a fiction. A perfectly crafted illusion born from one man's ambition and greed. A mummy from one tomb, treasures from another, stitched together with plaster, paint, and a web of lies, forever protected by a curse that was all too real. History is written by the victors, but sometimes it's also crafted by the cleverest deceiver. What do you think? Was Howard Carter the luckiest archaeologist in history, or the most audacious con man? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoy unraveling the mysteries of the past, be sure to subscribe.